Hello and welcome to another great edition, great episode of the Optimize Show. I am David Mamano, your host, and I have to say, today's show is going to be so special. And one of the reasons is because if you have lived in Rochester for the past 25 years-ish, you probably recognize this face. This is Norma Holland, who has been a Rochester business I want to say not business because I'm always talking about business.
Sure.
But media celebrity, right? Channel 13 for 24 years?
Yeah, almost 24 years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you were the morning show host, and you ran some shows on there, some community shows.
Yeah.
So Norma Holland is on my show today. Thank you, Norma.
It's a full circle moment here,
Full circle?
Dave. Oh my gosh.
Well, and she says that because Norma was kind enough when I was running my businesses, Next Step Magazine, etc. Norma and the team at Channel 13 would have me on your shows.
Sure.
So
we'd interview you about what you were doing.
interview me.
And now here I am taking questions from David Mamano.
I know.
This is a full circle
I have
moment.
so many pages.
I know. And I'm nervous.
And the last interview I did with you,
Yeah.
it was about a year before you moved on.
Yeah.
But you were like, I'm going to say massively pregnant. I think you
Yes.
had a baby like 2 weeks later.
I literally, you sent me into labor. Actually. Yeah, all the laughs that we had. I could barely sit on the stool that we were sitting on. I was like wobbling off of it. I was so.
You were like, I gotta have this baby.
Yeah, I was like, I gotta have this baby, Dave.
You're like, somebody help me, please.
I know, it's so amazing, and so that here we are, still, friends after all these years.
I love it.
So
Yeah, 20
gratifying.
plus years. So thank you for that. I love that I sent you into labor. That's great. Some people say, have some spicy Indian food.
Yeah.
No, just talk to Dave Mamano.
Talk to Dave Mamano. He'll send you into labor. You'll be done. You'll be fine.
I love that. Well, we've always had so much fun together, and I'm honored that you're on the show.
Thank you.
So the journey of Norma. So you are a true blue Rochesterian.
Yes.
Born and bred here.
Yeah.
You went to Bishop Kearney.
I did.
Yeah, and then you went to SUNY Geneseo. So, I mean, you're really you're in the fabric of the greater Rochester area,
Yeah,
right?
I'm all in there. Yeah,
you are
Rochesterian through.
Yeah, you never left, right?
No, I never did.
Yeah, I love it. Your family's still here and everything, and now you're married, kids, so you're here for a long time, which we love.
We're here for good.
So you went to 13 WHAM, worked with Don Alhart, Doug Embledge, Ginny Ryan, Jenny Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, all those
All
people.
the greats.
All the greats,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
In TV news, media has changed so much over the years.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, the wave that you all of you rode was incredible.
It was.
I mean, everybody I just mentioned was kind of like a staple of Rochester.
Yes.
I grew up with Don Elhart, right?
Yeah, we all did. I don't
know.
think there's anybody watching who didn't. I mean,
Yeah,
definitely he was an institution. He's a legend.
Yeah, for sure. And he just retired,
And
right?
he did
After
58 years.
58 years.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one for the record books. It is.
It is.
And I don't
Yeah.
think it'll ever be beat.
At one station, how can anybody do that now these days? So, well, and congratulations on all your success. So you were there for a long time, and then after a while, you were like, it's time to move on.
Yep.
What made you feel that way?
So I talk at length about this with a lot of people because what I didn't realize was that I was not alone in the feeling of it's time to go, but where to go, what to do. Because for so long I had this feeling when you are a person who's worked in a career that you worked really hard to get into, you almost feel like, well, I'm here and I'm going to ride it out till retirement, right?
Yeah.
But we are human beings and we have, we grow and we develop and we realize that the things that we wanted, we no longer want.
Yeah.
And you feel almost guilty about it because you're like, oh, but I worked so hard to get here. I can't possibly leave. Or I'm scared. What if I leave and it's awful and I want to come back? But I had reached a point where I just knew that it was time to go.
Yeah.
I cannot, every person will arrive at this moment for themselves in a different way. But for me, I knew it was in my bones. That's how you'll know it's time, because it's in your bones. You're like, I gotta go.
Right.
And it's not a running from, I wasn't so like awful that I just couldn't bear another day. It wasn't that. It was that I knew that I'd reached the point of my career, it was like, I need to learn new things.
Yeah.
Right? You feel stagnant. You feel like you stagnated. You need to learn new things. You want to develop new skills, and you just decide it's time to go.
Yeah.
So it really is so innate that it's like in your marrow.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can describe it.
I never heard that. I
And
like
you
that.
will know, and people say, well,
Yeah.
how did you know it was time to go? Oh,
Yeah.
you'll know.
It was in your marrow.
Oh, you will know, right?
I love that.
Because for years prior, if I
Yeah.
even contemplated leaving, I was terrified.
Yeah.
My blood pressure would go up. My
Yeah.
heart would start
Something
beating.
different and new, right?
You
Yeah.
just know
Yeah.
it wasn't time. It wasn't
Your
time.
soul was ripe. It was
I
a
was
calling.
there were things I wanted to do. And so once I reached that point where I knew it was time to go, I started to have conversations with people whom I trusted to keep this in confidence, to start talking about what it is I could do beyond television.
Yeah.
I'd used one set of skills or many skills for so many years. Were they transferable outside of television?
Yeah.
Right? What could I do beyond write stories and present stories in the morning show, and in broadcast journalism. And so having those conversations with people really helped me to sort of figure out who I was and what I could offer another organization, another business, or just in general, what could my life look like?
Yeah.
Now, children hasten things, right? Like when we
Right.
have kids, I mean, they really help you figure out, like, you got to get on the good foot quick, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, I knew I was a mom. I just had my girls. They were 1 and 3 when I left. So kids that helped me say, okay, Norma, you really do need to focus here. What is it that you
Yeah.
want to do?
New priorities.
New priorities, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and by you leaving,
Yeah.
and some of the people we just mentioned leaving, it allows just the next generation
Yes.
to take the news to its next level of
Yes.
evolution.
Yes.
Right, it's changing. The one guy that won't leave is Mike Catalana. We love Mike, right?
Yeah.
He's holding on, and,
Yeah.
and so there's still some semblance of what I knew growing up.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, I think I love the way that you put that. Is that we have to move on so that
Yeah.
others can develop themselves, and
Yeah.
so. I knew that my leaving would make a space and room for other young people who want
Right.
to do this and have it in them to want to. And I always say, if you're in a business or you're in a career for a long time and it's just not serving you anymore,
Yeah.
you're better off leaving, because what that does is it makes room for others for whom it
Right.
is what they want to do.
Yeah.
Right? Let them have their crack at bat and have
Yeah.
their turn to develop their own career.
Yeah.
So, it is a win-win. It really was for myself, for the organization, for 13.
Yeah.
So it did work out that way. But I love that idea. And I think that that's the thing. I didn't, and I say this with all love and affection, there was nowhere for me to go and to ascend. And I didn't. So once you realize that too, like if there's nowhere for you to go, and again, I'm not saying this like spitefully,
Right.
but if you don't see yourself developing somewhere,
Yeah.
then you need to go where you can develop.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's another impetus for leaving.
Yeah. No, it's a great way to say it. And and when you started in TV news, I mean, there was no internet. I mean, it was just starting.
Yeah.
It was just start. I mean, now
We didn't use it for news reporting or news research.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah. And I don't think TV news is going away, but people, especially younger people, are getting their news
Yes.
many different ways.
Yep.
And traditional TV news is a piece of the pie.
Yep.
But it kind of used to be the whole pie, right?
Yeah, it really
You know?
was. It was. And
Yeah.
so that model, that changing business model, the one thing I will say, not one thing, one of many things I will say that I think that 13 WHAM did really, really well was that they recognized 20 years before that this was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
We realized that as a model of delivery of news, it was changing.
Yeah.
The business model was changing, habits were changing, and we were trying to figure out how can we make money, right? From a business end, but then how can we also, from a reporting journalist end, deliver the news in a way that people are going to accept and want to and have readily accessible. We knew that this was the next device, right? This was, instead of looking at a screen, you're going to look at screen here, right?
Yeah.
So how do we do that? The business model, and finding that was a challenge for folks in sales, for people who do on the business end of things. From a journalist perspective, we knew our jobs was still the same to a degree, but we knew that whatever we did, whatever we recorded needed to go online. So and then the rise of social media changed our job, because now when we were out at a scene or out at a story, we wouldn't just rely on our photographer to get the video. We would take our devices, our phones, and we would record video, and we would put it on Facebook, on Twitter, and all the different platforms. And it was an expectation of our job that you would use social media. We used to have, this is so funny, I laugh at this now, but it was actually, I loved it. It was secretly like a thing. I loved it. There was a leaderboard at the station, and it had your face on a board. It was a digital screen, and you had there was the person who tweeted the most would have their face at number one, and so on and so forth. And so you were I just want to make the top 5. I just want to make top 5, right? So you tweeting all day, and it was funny. But what it was is that it was the station saying, and it was our management saying, engagement on these new platforms is key to the job. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have. We need to be where the viewers are. If they're on social media, we need to be there too.
Yeah, and it's done things. We just talked about Mike Catalana. He and his team have started a very successful podcast. Right, that's kind of related to Channel 13, right?
It is,
Buffalo Plus, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of adapting to social media in the new world, right?
You have to. If you do not adapt, you will be obsolete.
Right. Yeah. And I think it will continue to find its place of relevance.
Yes.
Right. It's reinventing right now. I remember you may remember in the 90s I was in radio. And I remember people saying that with cable news or just cable in general, that radio was in danger. And I was like, no, and then the person who owned the station at the time said, in the 50s, people were saying that TV was going to replace radio.
Right, would supplant radio.
Because the shows, the Milton Berle, all these shows were on radio. But when TV came along and Milton Berle and all those people went to TV, radio reinvented itself to play music, et cetera. So it found its place of relevance.
A new niche.
Yeah. It became relevant in a different way. And I think that's exactly what traditional TV news is doing these days. So
it is a metaphor for life. It is. I mean, it's in business. Adapt. I mean, they adapt or die, which is a little extreme, but it is adaptation and reinvention is key. So I look at that as a metaphor for business, but for also personal growth, right? There's a proverb that says, "If the wind will not serve, take the oars." Right. So we have to do that ourselves. We have to take the oars and redevelop, reinvent, whatever you want to call it.
If you can't grab the
pivot.
oars,
I love the pivot. Everyone
swimming.
pivots. Yeah, right. Exactly. Or you better learn to swim.
Or swim. Do whatever you can. You'll find a way.
You'll find a way.
I love it. So after 24 years, you moved on, and you went to a great company that has recently been sold called Digital Hive.
Yes.
With and the founder of that, the co-founder of that, Jeff Knaus,
yes,
has been on this show.
Yep.
He was just a brilliant entrepreneur.
We love Jeff.
And you went to, and he used to work at Channel 13
in
sales.
He was in sales. I met him on his first day at Channel 13. I never knew that one day he would be my boss.
How about that? Yeah, he's brilliant.
Talk about full circle moments. That was
he remembered we talked about on the show that he remembered when he still was working at Channel 13. I was at a business conference, saw you. And he was with you, but I didn't know him yet at the time. You just introduced us, and I showed you this thing I put on Facebook about business success, how it looks was like a straight line, but reality was, and it was like squiggly lines all over the place. And Jeff's like, I remember that, And I think he's done a pretty good job with this, at least making it look like a straight line.
Pretty good job. I think he's done a heck of a job.
Launched a new company called Open, O-P-I-N,
I know.
a mentorship
wonderful
platform,
place for entrepreneurs, which I think is brilliant, and taking from his experiences, being an entrepreneur and trying to help the next generation. But that's who he is. He was integral in my development professionally, I will say. He and I have always been very good friends from the minute I met him. Literally, I fell in love with him the minute I met him. But we became, he was one of those people whom I trusted to share my concerns about what I wanted to do in the future. And when he presented me with an opportunity to work for Digital Hive, which I will say unequivocally was the best experience, one of the best experiences of my life.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Going to Digital Hive was like having wings.
Yeah.
You know, and working for a company that, you know, combined business, technology, sales, which I was involved in the business development team working with a gentleman named Mike Kite, who was my business development manager, whom I love dearly. That was the best thing for me, because coming from a place where I'd done something the same way for 23 years, and not the same way, but you know what I'm saying,
right, yeah.
to an entirely different career, having to relearn. I mean, it was like, I felt like my brain, the synapses were just firing, you know, it was like learning new things, right? I was awakened in a way that I hadn't been. So I always credit Digital Hive with sort of giving me that spark to try new, and that bravery to try new things. I'll never, ever forget that.
Yeah, yeah. It allowed you to spread your wings,
Yes.
and fly, learn, and grow.
Yes.
So,
yeah, because
great.
we need the confidence to do so, Dave, because
Yeah.
we are also human beings and we are afraid,
Yeah.
and fear will keep you grounded.
Fear can be completely
It
paralyzing.
is, and it can be paralyzing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But when you see that, wait a minute, I can do this.
Yeah.
You know, I can hold my own. It gives you a
Yeah.
lot of confidence to try new things.
Fear is not real, even though it's real in our head. It's
Yeah.
actually something. What do they say?
Manufactured.
Fear stands for false evidence appearing real. Like that?
There you go.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love it.
I didn't make it up, but I like it.
That was really good.
Okay,
Is that
I
a
made it up.
Mamanoism?
I made
like
it up.
it.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah.
So you were there, and then you went to U of R for this great opportunity.
I did, yes.
And I'm going to read it. You are Director of Public Relations and Engagement in the Office of Equity and Inclusion.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. You
Yeah.
see, like you're smiling as I say it. So
I'm
obviously you're
smiling because I love my job.
Yeah.
I love my job. I was invited to apply to a job working for the University of Rochester. Their Office of Equity and Inclusion at the Medical Center needed someone to promote a newly developed institution-wide plan called the Equity and Anti-Racism Action Plan. It was born out of the racial reckoning of 2020 after the murder of George Floyd. The university had been for years, you know, working on issues of equity in many spaces and places across this institution, 40,000 people. But you know, they came out with this plan to really redevelop and reimagine what equity and inclusion could be like at the medical center, right? So with the students, with the faculty, with people across the institution, they developed this 5-year plan. And they needed someone to help them promote it. And they contacted me and said, hey, given your background in journalism, would you be willing to come and help us promote this across the institution? This was not something to be outward, but inward. Because if you think about it, the U of R has all these employees. It's its own ecosystem, right? So I said, sign me up. Because once again, it combined things, again, the writing, the learning of new things. But this time it added a component that I'd never been able to really express before, and that is I was able to use my heart. So my heart is in this work as much as my brain is. And so when I say my heart is because this is work to create new spaces for people who didn't feel welcome before, that's where my heart is.
Yeah.
I've always had a desire to want to do that. I did that for many years with my journalism, having a show where I invited people whose voices otherwise wouldn't make it onto the nightly news or evening news. I was doing the same thing, but now for an organization like the U of R.
That's awesome. Now, it seems like it's somewhat personal for you because being a woman of color.
Yes.
Have you ever experienced things where you didn't feel as included as you should be throughout the years?
Yeah, I did. And you know, there's also a feeling of, so not even just your voice not being heard, but marginalization, right?
Yeah.
Where you're sort of put off to the side. I am proud to say that during my career at 13 WAM, I never felt that. I always felt included, welcomed.
Yeah.
You know, my colleagues were the best.
Yeah.
But you know, growing up, did I feel that way? Sure. There were times that I didn't feel, you know, entirely welcomed.
Yeah.
There were moments of, you know, overt racism that I experienced, my sister included.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm fortunate to say that it did not deter me or deter me from using my voice. If anything, I think it made me louder. It made me more,
Even
you know,
louder.
you will hear me. Oh no, you will hear me. But people in my family have felt, you know, I mean, growing
Sure.
up, we heard lots of stories. My parents would share with us stories of, you know, again, incidents of overt racism, but also of marginalization where their voices were sort of like, you know, where they didn't feel welcomed, right? Places that they didn't feel welcomed.
Yeah.
And what that did was it sort of stoked a fire in my belly to make sure that I was heard, right? And that I would also advocate for people who did not have a voice.
Yeah.
And so for me, that kind of became, I think that's why I maybe gravitated toward journalism, was because I was doing that on a nightly basis, helping to tell the stories of people, you know, in addition to the day-to-day, but also people who didn't feel that they had a voice, right? And, you know, journalists have an incredible amount of privilege. And so I took that very seriously, and I still do. I still take that very seriously wherever I am.
Do you feel that it's gotten better? Because we hear about, you know, I bet your parents have some stories that would shock us, right?
Sure.
You know, like, what? That happened, right?
Yeah.
I just had Tom Bonadio on the show. He started his accounting firm in 1978. He talks about how people wouldn't do business with him because he was Italian. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You know? So,
Like, how silly.
How silly.
What do you
right.
mean? What?
Yeah.
You know?
You know,
Yeah.
he's you know, he's an incredible accountant.
Sure.
Do business with him, right?
Right.
So, so looking back at some of probably stories from your parents and, you know, my grandparents, Tom Bonadio, what he just said, we certainly have made some progress because some of that stuff is shocking.
Sure.
Which is good that it's shocking, right?
Right.
How far do you think we've come, and and how far do you think we still have to go?
Sadly, I think people look at the work of equity and inclusion as just give me the numbers, right? And it's not about just numbers. It's not just about how many people do we hire of a certain background.
Right.
It is, and that is a big component of it, though. Okay, I mean, we can go on and on about, you know, how diverse medical teams deliver better care, how patients fare better. We can go on and on about diversification and inclusion in business helps to create a better business product, helps to create a better environment. But it is also about how people are feeling when they're in the job. It's not enough to just hire someone of color. It's critical that when they're there, that they feel welcomed and invited and heard and respected, right?
And
not
to be their
just
best.
people of color. I'm talking women. I'm talking people with disabilities. I'm talking people of different, you know, LGBTQ plus, different, you know, experiences. It is critical that people feel welcomed wherever they go. So I think, has it gotten better? I think in some ways it has. You know, in 2020, lots of businesses pledged to, you know, institute policies that would promote equity, that would promote inclusion. We've seen a backslide of some of that in certain spaces and places. Some big businesses have decided to, you know, do away with DEI programming. And so, you know, I say that they do so at their peril because, you know, I think Americans and young people expect to go into a workplace, and I'm going to really focus on the young people because they view the world so differently than we do. Let's be honest, okay? And they value these things. These are things that they value in a business that they go work for, right? How inclusive are you? You know, and so it is critical that businesses and organizations get this and really make an effort at it because it's not just the right thing to do, it's the right thing to do for business.
Right. Yeah.
You know, you can make the business case, you can make the moral case, you can make all kind of cases. But you know, for your viewers, it's good for business.
Well, and maybe what I'm hearing from you is that the first phase of this was, it kind of was a numbers game, right?
Sure.
And now the next phase of this is like, okay, that's step one.
Sure.
Step two is what you were just saying.
Working on the culture and the climate.
Let's make everybody feel included and create a culture where not only do they feel welcomed and included and part of the team, but providing an environment for them to be their best with their gifts at work, right? You know? And I think you're totally right. I think younger people are growing up with a completely different perspective. Like my son a few years ago, he was kind of cute when he said it. He goes, "Dad, is this racist?" I go, "What?" He goes, "I have some black friends at school, some Puerto Rican friends, but I don't even look at them as black or Puerto Rican. They're just my friends." And I go, I think that's beautiful.
It is. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, you certainly want to respect if they are coming from places of challenges.
Sure.
But at the same time, the fact that he doesn't see color, which I think is, one of the original dreams, right?
Yeah, well, it is. But I will say, though, that we also don't want to make color or a person's background a dirty word, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it's okay if you see me as a person you could say, it's okay if you look at me and see a Puerto Rican woman or ask me about my Hispanic background, which I am.
Right.
I'm Hispanic.
Yeah.
But like, for me, it's I think we need to also recognize that, I do see your color. You see my color. It's hard for you not to see my color or someone, of another color. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that you recognize it. I think, though, because we want to see people in their entirety, right? So if you see someone who's black, but because I'll say the same thing. Like, I have a friend, who's black, but I mean, I don't look at him and this is the first thing I think of, right? But at the same time, I recognize, though, because he is black, he's a different experience and a different lived experience than I do.
Right.
And so I respect that we have a different lived experience. Because even though I see him as my friend, it doesn't mean that our experience in life is the same. It doesn't mean that he's not going to face challenges that I don't, right? And so recognizing that is also part of the equation.
Yeah, I think that's
and I think it's
powerful.
beautiful, though, that young people today, for them, it's just,
And what you just took that to the next level, where describing somebody's ethnicity should never be considered a dirty word or something bad, right? I mean, as long as it's
I'm comfortable doing it, but I know a lot of people are not, you know? And growing up, I remember my father saying, you never talk about religion, you never talk about, what was the other thing? Religion
Sex,
and
politics,
something,
right.
Politics and religion. I'm comfortable having those conversations, but I deeply recognize that for some people, it's taboo. They don't want to talk about it. They're afraid. There's a lot of fear in conversations because no one wants to get the finger wag. Oh, let me tell you something, Dave Mamano, right? That's not how we bring people in. That's how we make more boundaries and prevent people from talking about difficult things.
And I think that's the next level too, is people getting comfortable with that. My daughter, Melania, when she was in 5th grade, she got scolded by the teacher because she described the new girl in the class as somebody as the new Mexican kid. And she didn't mean anything by it. I mean, the kid she was from Mexico. And why should that be? Like the teacher's like, you shouldn't describe her that way. Why not? If to the new Italian kid, the new Swedish kid, the new German kid, that'd be fine, right? So I see what you're saying. And I think it just becomes an awareness thing, and it just kind of evolving.
It is. It's just about making these moments teachable moments, right?
Exactly.
To a child who said something like that, like clearly they don't mean anything by it.
She was in 5th grade,
And so what you would say is, honey, she is from Mexico, right? But she's so much more than that, right? And so when we look at her, we can describe her as many things, right? So I think that all those things are teachable moments, and again, it's about bringing and calling people in. I see sometimes people very afraid of being called a racist or something, and I understand that. No one wants to be labeled that. But we also just have to be open to learning new things, new ways of expressing ourselves, new ways of bringing people in, right? I mean,
love that.
there's so many, and the great thing about today is there's so many opportunities to do that, right? You go on I'll get on a Zoom call and someone will introduce himself and say, I'm so-and-so, my pronouns are such and such. And that was not heard of 5 years ago. And now it's very commonplace. And you can do it or you cannot do it. It doesn't make you a bad person if you don't, but that you accept that other people do. I think it's about, there really is, all boats rise with the tide. Okay? And so when we feel, when you feel that by me being uplifted, you're also uplifted. I think that's something really important. And it gets to that whole scarcity mentality, right? I mean, if they get something and I don't get something, then that means it's less for me. We can't look at life that way. Because you and I both know there's enough to go around. And don't we all need it? I mean, don't we all need to be uplifted, Dave? I mean,
absolutely.
I cannot say people, regardless of your background, we all want to be heard. We all want to be respected. We all want to be loved.
100%.
These are human needs.
Do you remember that book? It was kind of a coffee table book in the 90s. It was 100, what was the name of the book? 101 Things to Do to Live a Great Life or something like that. Or to make people feel special. And number one in that book was, a person's greatest need is to feel appreciated. Number one.
That's it.
And it could be words. It could be a pat on the back. It could be like, great job, Norma, on that story, or what like great speech.
We don't forget those things.
Yeah.
I think they,
Yeah.
I know that over the years I got so much hate mail, right? People would say the worst things.
Did you really?
Yeah. But I never, so what I would like file that away in my gray matter, right? And I would pull it out on my worst day. Oh, that person said, like my suit, and they thought I was fat, and they don't like my hair. And then I'm like, why am I filing away these little tiny bits of hate?
Let it go.
Instead, I created a file of the nice emails I got,
Yeah.
right?
Perfect.
I mean, or I had a box at home of like the nice things, like my friends would write me little notes, and I would save those. And on a bad day, I would open the box up and I would look at these notes.
Yeah.
And that uplifts us so much
Build
more.
it. Build the good.
Yeah, you have to.
It's funny you say about emails, because this is many years ago now. For somebody, I signed my signature. I typed it in. I was like, "You're awesome, comma Dave."
Yeah.
And they loved it. They're like, "I needed to hear that. Thank you so much." And I said, "You know what? It's my standard. It's my clocked in signature now."
Yeah?
It says, "You're awesome."
That's great.
For everybody.
I love that.
And so some people are funny, because if they'll get like another email from me, and then at first I thought you wrote that just for me, Dave, but now I see it's your standard email. And I'm like,
I thought I was special, Dave.
what I tell them is, I said, yes, it is standard, but I want you to know that for some people, I do remove it.
You're not so special, Dave. Yeah.
Sincerely.
Regards.
So now somebody gets one of this sincerely. No.
Everyone's checking their email.
Most people are awesome. Most
Tim,
people
what
are
did Dave
awesome.
say?
Sometimes, I'm like, I can't do it.
Not today.
So I just want to end a little bit more on U of R. I'm an adjunct over there. I teach
that's great.
a fifth-year program called the E5 program, where students opt to stay a fifth year.
Okay.
And if they get accepted into the program where they actually start a business, it's free. It's a free fifth year.
Awesome.
And you should come into our class sometime, because it's
I'd love to.
It's diversity on steroids. It is beautiful. It's all over the world. Women, men, colors, everything is beautiful.
That's why higher education's so awesome, because it's just a microcosm of
it
the
really
world,
is. It really is. And so when I'm on U of R, I definitely feel the presence of the DEI strategies.
Yeah.
What are some best practices that you engage in, or since you've been there, what are some of the things that you have found successful?
I think that businesses that have made a pledge to, consider the experience of their employees, I think that, when we at the University of Rochester, we rely very heavily and we refer often to our values. Our Meliora values, right?
Yeah.
And or if you're at the medical center, our eye care values, right? And so each letter stands for something, right?
Yeah.
And but we rely on those values to guide us. And I think that organizations need to look at their value system. What is their value system? If you don't have one, develop one, right? And then share it with all your new hires and everyone who interacts with your business. This is who we are, right? This is our way of being. Yeah. And once you have established that, I think all things flow from that, right? And so it really should then be a part of your culture. So yes, if you intentionally seek to add people from a different background or increase the numbers of diverse candidates, when you're hiring, consider where you're sourcing your candidates from, right? I'll often talk about the pool from which you're fishing, right? Consider the source, consider those things. If you're intentional in that, make sure that when you get people on board and when you onboard them, that you make very clear what your values are as an organization, and then really live by that and stand by that, right? I sometimes think, like I said earlier, that businesses will say, well, I hired a woman, or I hired, someone from a particular background, and well, isn't that good enough, right? Don't I get a pat in the back? It's that's only half the equation. No, and it's not. You can't be performative about it. You have to, it's a process, right? You got to keep, you got to make sure that person feels welcomed, right? I think
awareness, education.
Awareness, education. I'm glad you said that. Education is key, right? Educating people on new ways of thinking, and then not making it a situation where, like, if you don't do this, you're in trouble. You've got to create opportunities where people can ask questions and feel safe asking them. Right? And
want to do it naturally. Want to do more of these best practices just as a habit.
And then look at your policies as a business. What are your
Yeah.
policies, right? Are they inclusive? You know, we actually created a policy equity toolkit at the University of Rochester. Our office helped with a wonderful local consultant, Crystal Ellis, and she helped us create this policy equity toolkit. You can take any policy and run it through this rubric of questions, and it makes you consider, forces you to consider, how equitable are our policies?
Right. Yeah,
You know, change can begin at that policy level in some
Yeah, yeah.
cases, right?
Yeah.
And so look at your policies and your
Yeah.
programming and see how equitable are they.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then do your best to try and change them, right?
Yeah.
Those are just a couple of things I would suggest for businesses,
Yeah,
right?
having-
I mean, we don't have all the answers. I don't have to consider myself
yeah.
the be all and end all of equity and inclusion because I make mistakes too, Dave. I say
Yeah.
things, I put my foot in my mouth, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. But humility is key.
Yeah.
If you're humble about things, you know, and you
Yeah.
and you make a gaffe or you whatever, just apologize
Yeah.
and move on.
People make mistakes.
We're all human.
And on both ends, if someone makes a mistake, give them the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah.
maybe the first time.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure that,
Yeah.
you know, I want to understand what you meant, you know.
Exactly.
You
And
know?
that's calling people in,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the way you do that and say, what did you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah.
And then when they answer and then say, okay, well, and
Yeah.
then maybe you can share, well, that made me feel this way. And you might realize the person didn't mean it that
they
way.
didn't mean it that way, sure.
And now what you've done is you've opened a great dialogue with them.
Yeah, and that's a learning opportunity. Talk about education, right? Hands-on education, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm with you. I mean, my foot's in my mouth probably at least once a day. And I'm like, didn't mean it that way.
I
Oops.
love that you admit it. I think that's great because what you do is you give
Yeah.
everyone permission to make a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm
and
like, can you give me
and
the
to
benefit of the
move
doubt,
on.
please?
Yeah.
I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Well, Norma Holland, I've been waiting for this for a long, long time. Finally, the worm has turned, and I got to interview you. It was just an incredible interview, full of great energy and knowledge.
I have loved being interviewed by Dave Mamano.
Thank
This
you.
was fun.
I appreciate
Thank you
that.
for the
How do
opportunity.
you like being in this chair?
I like it. This is great. I don't have to come up with any questions.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It's wonderful. Thank you for the
Excellent.
opportunity to get to know your viewers and to
If they
share a
want to
little
reach out
bit
to you,
about my
how do they
life.
reach out to you?
Okay, so you can email. I'm on the socials. I'm on
Yeah.
X or Twitter. You can find me at at Norma. Wait, what is it? Okay, at Holland2Norma, the number 2,
Right.
on Twitter. I'm on Facebook and on
LinkedIn.
Instagram. On LinkedIn. Join me and
Yeah.
definitely reach out to me there. Happy to hear from you. Any questions, comments, please send them my way.
Love that. Norma, thank you for not only being on the show, but really being in the fabric of Rochester and making a big difference and impact in our community.
Love my city.
All these years. And you're still very young. So
I am.
We have Norma, you're in 2.0 phase right now, you know? So I love it.
Always sharpening the saw,
I love
right?
it.
As
I
Stephen
love it.
Covey used to say. So
Yep.
always
Keep it sharp.
reinventing and reimagining. That's what you do.
Yep.
You know?
If you're not growing, you're
I
dying.
wanted to say to you to be continued, Dave, because I know we're going to keep talking, you and I.
Absolutely. Let's do this at least once a year.
Okay, let's
All
do
right?
it.
And,
Yeah.
and people can watch how we're like fine wine and we actually get better looking. So
It's a burden, but we do our best.
someone's got to do it. It's a gift. It's a gift. Thank you. Thanks again, Norma. Really
You're welcome.
appreciate it. And I want to thank you, everybody, for watching another episode. What a great episode of the Optimize Show. I'm Dave Amano, your host. Please, just do me a favor. Like us, share us, subscribe, the whole works. You know what to do. We're getting best practices, great information, so that, as Norma said, we can share it and all boats rise with the tide. That's what we want to do for our community and beyond. Thanks again. Make sure to have a great day and stay awesome.